Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. How we doing today, Joe?
Man, I am doing great. We've had some nice weather along the Gulf Coast this week. Temperatures are still a little bit cooler. Not that I would say they're cool, but it's been a welcome reprieve from this heat. And for all intents and purposes, the fishing is really hot. We've got some really great reports this week, inshore, offshore, and onshore. We got an all-star lineup this week. I'm really excited about. How you been?
Good, man. We got a special guest this week, correct?
That's right. We got Michael Carr. Michael is one of the owners over at Fish Bites, and I had a chance to talk with Michael and hear the story of how Fish Bites was created. And it was something I felt like we talk about Fish Bites so much on this podcast. We have lots of fish bite fanatics for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, and for good reason. You know, all of our surf fishing guys use it. All of our inshore guys are starting to use it, and whether it's the Fight Club series lures, or I love that they're starting to take those fish bites and cut them up and add that to their artificial shrimp in some cases, add a little scent to it. That's really helping them. But I wanted to bring Michael on the show and let Michael tell the story of Fish Bites and how it was created, because I think it's a really cool story. So, Michael, welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, man.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
How is your summer going?
We're busy. We're making bait, man.
Making bait. I love it. Well, you know, you guys have got a lot of new stuff out there, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I really want you to do is tell me, how did y'all dream this stuff up?
The creation of Fish Bites goes back to the 1950s when my dad was a kid growing up in New Smyrna Beach, and he was fishing with his dad / my grandfather, and he grew up fishing. I mean, he had fishing deep in his DNA from a very early age, fishing around Mosquito Lagoon and surf fishing here in New Smyrna. And one day he was out as a little boy fishing with my dad along a place called Turtle Mound, and he cut his foot on an oyster. It wasn't a severe cut, but it was enough, to see a little red come out. And he noticed immediately that all these tiny creatures came out from under the rocks and oyster shells and started going after his wound on his foot. And that moment stayed with him all the way through his academic career. What caused that to happen? Why did those tiny creatures come up and start wanting to nibble on that fresh wound? And how'd they even know it happened? It's not like they understood English. Even if he shouted in pain, they didn't respond to that.
That's right.
So what was it in his blood that told these fish that, hey, there's something wounded nearby. You need to come gnaw on it.
So he took that and he took that into academia, right? I mean,
yes, he was determined to figure out what are the actual chemicals inside of shrimps and crabs and clams and squids that tell fish that there's a wounded prey item nearby, and it's time to go eat something. And beyond that, what is in that shrimp or crab or clam or squid that tells fish this is actually food and not some thing that's just floating along in the water. And so that is kind of how he developed the 1-2 punch with Fish Bites. He was able to synthetically recreate these scents. I kind of say Fish Bites is kind of like a fruit roll-up for fish. You eat a fruit roll-up, no disparaging the company that makes them, but there's no actual fruit in the strawberry fruit roll-up. It's all synthetically recreated based on what we smell and taste. And the same scientific method can be applied to creating fish bait. And so that's basically what he did. And so he was able to find the chemicals, the active ingredients in these prey items that told a fish, hey, something's poked a hole in me. Someone needs to come along and take a bite.
So tell me about that research. How did he go about doing that? I mean, what was some of the process for him to?
Sounds messy. Sounds like
like detract
some blenders.
Yes.
Synthesize them.
Many shrimp met their end in a high RPM blender.
It sounded like that's exactly what I picture when you say that.
He had an advantage early on in his research. He was asked to leave the University of Florida campus and go set up the Whitney Marine Lab in Marineland, Florida, which is just south of St. Augustine. And so for a while, he was like one of the only researchers in this whole building. And he had free run of the place. And in this building, there's a huge wet lab with like 30 55-gallon aquariums in it. And so he was able to run numerous experiments all at one time to help whittle down what these ingredients are. And then once he was able to discern the active ingredients from the non-active ingredients, he was able to you go buy those ingredients from pharmaceutical companies and you blend them together and put them in a gel, and bang, you've got a shrimp.
And that is so cool. So, I mean, it brings it full circle for me, because the first time I saw fish bites, I was like, no way, yeah, be perfectly honest. Like, I mean, when I saw the bag, somebody was like, you need to try these fish bites. I was like, but I tried them and I was immediately hooked. I mean, it was an immediate, I didn't have to figure them out. Like, they just worked right off the bat. So this really brings it full circle for me to just kind of see that, man, this isn't like something that y'all just kind of threw together and some snake oil or anything like this. This is scientific, really chemical engineering.
Yeah, this is 30 years of research, and and Dad's particular set fields of study lent him the ability to figure this out. And so yeah, he kind of, whatever science or whatever degree or whatever field of study he had to go into to sort this formula out, he went into that field and excelled at it. So this is an amalgam of 3 or 4 different fields of study all slammed into one box.
It's very cool. So tell me about you. We talk about fish bites on here a lot. We talk about the Fight Club series for our inshore guys that are, wanting to mimic artificial shrimp and those types of presentations. What else do you guys have on the horizon? I know you've got some stuff on the freshwater side with your jig strips. Bob's your uncle. Jig strips. Now, those could probably be used. I haven't had a chance to use them yet, but would those apply to like a cobia fisherman if he wanted to put those, use them as a bucktail strip?
I say yes a little hesitantly, because I think they're a little bit on the small side for cobia fishing, but they're the right shape and they have the right action. I just think the presentation is a little small, and we may also not have the right color. Right now, we've got 3 colors, and usually what I hear from the cobia guys, they want it almost like an eel black kind of color or something a little darker than what we currently make.
Right.
But I think if you're in them, you're probably going to hook a couple of them on one of those baits. And
you've got you've got obviously the jig strips. You've got some catfish baits over on the freshwater side. Is there anything new on the horizon? I mean, that you can tell us about? I'm sure I can envision the Fish Bites laboratory. Y'all are probably cooking something up you can't tell us about. But is there anything new on the horizon? What about our bottom fishing guys? We got a lot of guys that fish offshore. Is there anything for those guys out there?
Well, first I'll go back a little bit to the Bob's Your Uncle, because that is going to be a whole line of products. So there's the Bob's Your Uncle, curly tail strips that we just talked about. And then there's going to be something called a Bob's Frog, which is that old frog lure that was made that used to be a pork rind.
Right.
And now we've made it out of our material and our flavor sense. And so that's coming out next year. So there's going to be a Bob's Frog to go with Bob's Your Uncle. We're also starting to get into the world of a little bit of terminal tackle. We've got some surf rigs that we're making.
Okay.
We've got jig heads. The Fish Bites Fight Club has its own line of jig heads with a very aggressive lure hook that are on the heads themselves to keep that lure stuck on there a little better. And we also have come up with our own weighted worm hook, and that'll be coming out next year.
Very cool. Well, man, like I say, I really wanted everybody to hear that story. I thought it was such a cool story. It really just makes me even more of a fan of y'all's baits, knowing that it's 40 years, of research going into these things. And it's really cool that you guys, you were able to do that with your dad, and y'all got a business there. Y'all are, family owned and running it. So I just wanted to have you on, and I appreciate you being on with us today and telling us a little bit more about it. I know folks love your stuff that listen to this podcast, but if you're hearing this and you got some, pursuits outside of the saltwater side, it sounds like they need to go check out the website. And if they want to do that, what's the URL for Fish Bites?
It will be fishbites, fishbites.com. And also our social media is extremely active. You can go to our Fish Bites Facebook page or Twitter or Instagram, and you'll find many, many dozens upon dozens of testimonials. And, another thing is what's rare in this industry now is that we're actually made here in the United States from the ground up in St. Augustine, Florida. So there aren't, you don't have to hunt around on the package to look for made in China because you're not going to see it.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, next time I'm in St. Augustine, I got to get by that facility. I love St. Augustine anyway, but I definitely got to get by and see what you guys are doing in the lab there. That's
you could see it, but then what happens next.
Right. Yeah. But you'd have to kill me.
Yeah.
You'll never leave.
Well, Michael, again, thanks for joining us this week, and hopefully we can check back with you soon and see some new things on the horizon for Fish Bites.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you guys.
Man, that's a cool story from Fish Bites.
It is. That's cool stuff. You don't, I don't know. Like you say, I'm just picturing a bunch of fishermen walking around in lab gear doing tests on stuff. Those two things normally don't go together.
Right.
Interesting there. But yeah, it's really cool stuff, man. Sounds like been a long time in the making. And like you say, made in the USA. You can't beat that.
Shows you what's possible in the USA if you got a dream and you work at it. It's
no doubt about that.
Anything you really want to dream is possible here, man.
That's right.
Butch, we got a really cool show lined up this week. Who's bringing it to us?
And this week's show is brought to us by our local Geico insurance office. Everybody knows Geico has great auto rates, but did you know they also have great rates on boats, ATVs, motorcycles, and personal watercraft? Give Ron Davis a call at 251-445-0053. Not only will Ron work hard to get you the lowest premium possible, but you'll have the service you expect and can count on if you ever need to make a claim. But Geico does even more than insure your valuable items. They also offer on-the-water services like towing, battery jumps, gas delivery, and you can save by bundling these services with your insurance. If you are an Alabama saltwater fisherman, support the local insurance agent who helps bring you the fishing report each week. Call Ron Davis, Geico agent, at 251-445-0053 or visit him online at geico.com/mobile-al. What we got next, Bubba? Let's get right into this thing.
Yeah, let's take it inshore. One of my favorites, the Marshal of the Mississippi Sound, Bobby Abruscato. What you say, Captain Bobby? How's the fishing been on the inshore side of things?
Dude, I'm going to tell you something. It has absolutely been as good as it I think it can get. I don't know how long it was, a month or a week ago, 6 weeks ago or so. I was kind of crying the blues. This is the exact antithesis of that. It's been phenomenal, man. The fish are really behaving like they're supposed to behave. When you find them, you catch them. They bite. The quality's good. The quantity's good. I mean, it's just really been good. The bait supply is phenomenal, and this is live bait time of the year. I mean, during the summer, it's I love the artificial bait fish, and I wish I could do it all the time, but you better have bait this time of year. And again, the bait's plentiful, whether you want to catch it by yourself or buy it. The bait shops are loaded with nice bait. So, man, it's all working out good. And then, of course, you guys have been out enough to know, man, we've had just this phenomenal stretch of weather, too, where we've had these light north winds, medium to light north winds, and it's not been just so brutally hot. And I don't know if that affects the fish as much as it affects the attitude of the anglers. So when we're getting out there, everybody's not whipped by 7 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
Definitely.
But, yeah, been phenomenal, man. We've been mainly fishing down in the Sound. The water's as clear down there as except for like during the dead of winter where it gets extremely clear down there in the dry months. The water's as clear as I've ever seen it down there. I mean, it is beautifully clear, and there's just, again, getting back to the bait a little bit, there's a lot of shrimp boats down there, and those guys don't go down there and pull those nets in those big boats just because they like to burn gas. They're down there because there's bait down there, and there's bird schools, and a lot of places which are on, the trout are running the shrimp to the surface, so the birds are diving on those. So those are giving a lot of fish away, but the days that we're actually having to, if you don't see the bird schools or even before, we've been leaving before daylight, fishing the structure down in the Sound, and that's the rigs and the reefs and the wrecks and that sort of thing. And, all of that stuff is got a bunch of fish on it, and they're willing to bite. We're on a really good tide cycle now through this past week, and then into the weekend, we're on this really good tide cycle where you have, almost kind of a high tide first thing in the morning. It's just starting to fall as the sun's coming up, and that's when the magic happens, So we've been through a great tide cycle, had great weather, get plenty of bait, so it's good. I'll tell you, it's as good as it gets for this time of year, or really for any time of the year, but for this time of year, which, you start to get late summer, a lot of times the fish have been beat up pretty well. And again, it's kind of a live bait deal. And Sometimes the water gets a little stirred up because we get a lot of west winds, but the wind direction has really helped keep the water clear, and just everything's worked out good, man. So it's all been really, really good.
It really seems like since that hurricane came through, it's just Butch. I mean, don't you feel like that's kind of about? It's like things just completely switched. We got that better water in here, and it's really picked up.
Yep, and now I'll tell you something. We were talking about that just today. You know, that was kind of seemed to kind of be the switch. You know, when that little squall or that little storm came through, and that's when some things really kind of turned around and started getting really good. And you know, and I think we probably could go back to the archives, but I think I remember talking a little bit about that. So I'm going to say, I told y'all, as soon as that hurricane comes through or whatever this thing is, I said, this thing's going to switch around. Did I say that really? I don't.
You did. And
I think you did.
I'm taking credit for it. Anyway.
I believe there was a little bit of discussion too about the moon phase, you know, switching out of that moon phase we were in and getting into a little better pattern there.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. But, you know, we talked a little bit about last time we had you on Fishing with Croakers, and I'm going to take a minute to plug a couple of things. So you've got an excellent article that I just published on greatdaysoutdoors.com. It was previously in Great Days Outdoors magazine that's about summer speckled trout fishing, specifically with live croakers. So if y'all want to check that out, Bobby's he's the man when it comes to that, but he wrote a really good article about that. And it's up right now on the main page at greatdaysoutdoors.com. And in the July issue, I did an article on pulling small shrimp trawls with a good friend of mine, Justin Ishii, and the guys over at Island Boy Seafood. Kind of got his process on what he does there. Bobby, I know you pull a small Ned bait pretty easy to come by. I know you said it's plentiful, so those croakers pretty easy to find.
They are, yeah. It's been good on the croakers, and you're exactly right. I like to catch my own croakers. I buy shrimp because the guys, I'm not real good at catching shrimp, and it's just it's a hassle. But I love catching my own croakers, and I drag a 12. I got a 12-foot net that's kind of got some tweaks to it that helps you catch the fin fish that the normal the shrimpers don't want those fin fish in their nets.
Right.
So they build their nets, you know, or they'll build their nets to concentrate on the shrimp. I built a net, or had a friend of mine help me design a net that actually does a better job of catching those fin fish before they get over the net. So it does a phenomenal job of catching the fin fish. And I like dragging, you know, at this time of year, you know, when you really want to use croakers. It's getting light a little bit later in the morning, so I got time to drag in the morning. But yeah, they've been really plentiful. The mouth of the bay and the Gulf beaches around the tip, not the Gulf beaches themselves, but the tips of the island. That's the places right now that are really good for croaker drags, you know. And or if you can find kind of a channel, there's a little drop off or anything like that. That's a good place to drag for them. But yeah, it doesn't take long. And the other thing that I've been doing too, in addition to dragging a net, if I got time, is you can go out and hook and line croakers with just a little brim hook. And a lot of times you don't have to be in your boat. You can do them off docks, any place that's got shell or rocks. You can just get a little brim hook with a piece of squid or gulp or little pieces of dead shrimp, and you can catch, you know, a couple dozen croakers pretty quick. You know, doing that if you get on the right little place too, just a little split shot with a brim hook on it. And, you know, it's just kind of something to do while you're sitting there in the afternoon, you know, off a dock or whatever. So there's two different ways to catch those croakers, but anytime you can get those fresh caught croakers, that's going to be the killer on the trout, you know, on trout when you're using croakers.
So Bobby, the pattern right now, are these fish staged on deeper water structure? Or, you know, we talked last week with Richard, and he was out on the beach. Where have you been?
I've been fishing the deep structure, mainly in the Sound, and you can I haven't been much out in the bay, but that would work too. And it's just, you know, like we were just talking about, it's been phenomenal. That's been the deal with me. And usually what I'm doing, there's so much structure out there. I kind of change from day to day which little piece of structure I'm going to start on, but every bit of it's got fish on it. The action just gets phenomenal when you hit the right piece of structure and set your boat up right and get your depth right and that sort of thing. I mean, the action's just absolutely been phenomenal. You know, I had a stretch here, just finished up today, a stretch to where yesterday we ran around looking for blackfish, but I would have had 5 days in a row that we would have not had to fish after 7:30 in the morning.
Wow. That's
how fast the bite's been, you know, and we did but we had our fish, the fish we were going to keep, and we were done keeping fish by 7:30, you know, before 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's just that's the way the bite's been. It's just been phenomenal. It's not just one little piece of structure either. It's just kind of everywhere, down there. So it's really exciting. It's fun to be like this again after what we went through back in, I guess that was in June. When we had such a slow period there. It's just in the back of my mind, I was going, I hope there's something not wrong. Nothing wrong with the fishery. But I've been finding out that things are in pretty good shape.
You said something just a second ago about setting your boat up right. Now, let's just talk about that for a second. And let's use the Mississippi Sound as an example. Let's say you're fishing the CCA reef, one of these public reefs that's right there in the Mississippi Sound and some of that deeper water. What do you mean by getting your boat set up right? What are the things that you got on your checklist to fish deep water structure?
Well, when I know what piece of structure I'm going to fish, I always get the boat up current. Sometimes the wind and the current aren't always running the same direction. Like the CCA reef, for example, that you just used, that tide runs from east to west or west to east, depending on if it's falling or coming in. But the wind's been blowing the north. So if you picture that, you've got the wind and the tide are about 90 degrees to each other. So you got to kind of factor in which way you're going to be casting and which way the bait you're going to be drifting. To get and the fish don't care which way the wind's blowing. They care about which way the bait's coming from. So you have to kind of figure out, how you can get your boat set up and make your cast to where you can present that bait so it's drifting into the structure. And you got to picture the fish relating to that structure, feeding, facing into the current, relating to the structure. So they want that bait coming into the structure. So you got to set that boat up so you can make the cast and allow that up current of the structure and allow that bait to drift into the structure rather than just go, you definitely want to go anchor your boat right on the structure. You want to kind of figure out how that boat's going to set up, how you can get that bait to drift into the structure. In a perfect world, either with no wind or the wind in the exact same direction as the current, you could just anchor up straight up current from the structure. We call it drop and drift. Just drop your bait in the water and just leave your reel out of gear and let it float right back to the structure. And that's perfect. You guys have fished enough to know that don't happen very often.
Right.
More often than not, you've got to battle some kind of condition to where you've got to kind of factor all that in. The worst thing in the world is when you get the wind going one way and the tide going the other. And you guys, doing the offshore fishing you've done for so long, I know you know what I'm talking about there. That's a real challenge because you have to kind of figure out how to get your bait to come, set the boat up to get your bait to come back to the structure, which a lot of times, if you're cork fishing especially, the wind strong overpowers the current and you just never get a drift, So that's another thing that I always kind of factor is I'm going like, well, if I got an incoming tide in the bay and I got a north wind, they're going to totally cancel each other out. So I'm not going to go fish the bay if I got like we've had this week where you've had a north wind and an incoming tide because the tide runs south to north and you got north wind, it just checks everything up and there's no way you can get a natural drift, so you have to kind of play that wind and play that tide, to figure out how to get your bait to drift naturally.
Man, that's what I like about talking to you, Bobby, is you can take, you've got all these variables. No, I love it, man. You've got all these variables in your mind and it's like you're taking what normally a guy like me would have to do is I'd have to separate out these two variables and make a decision based off of that. But you're letting those two variables, dictate these other two variables, and then that's telling you a pattern and sending you in a direction. And that's a lot of just being on here and all your time on the water and sharing that with everybody is so beneficial for folks that are listening because you've put that together and you can do it on the fly. It doesn't so much happen for me.
Well, I hope I'm verbalizing it as well as I can picture it in my mind and I know what I want to do, but trying to get that to come out
I think you did great.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And again, not to even confuse it some more, but if you also have to kind of factor in the crew that you're going to have. Can my crew cast or do I need to get where they can drift? And you know what I'm talking. You guys have been on charter trips umpteen times, so you know what I'm talking about. You have to factor that in too, So, yeah. But the key thing is, I think if you came away with one thought that you could remember is just try and figure out what's going to be what can I do to get that bait to drift naturally across that or into that structure? How do I need to set the boat up and make my cast so I can get that bait to drift naturally into, over, and past the structure so I can figure out where the fish are?
And not drive over the structure itself. I've seen so many people do that. Yeah. They're driving over the fish that they're going to try to fish.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just amazing too. It's where, and it's whether it's shallow or deep water fishing, you want to drift into where you're going to fish or let the boat float into it or however you're going to do it, don't ride right over where you're going to fish, then then quietly put the anchor out when you run over them with your outboard. It doesn't do you any good. So you got to, get upwind or up current from where you're going to fish. Try and line yourself up as best you can, and then ease that anchor over and let the boat kind of drift in there naturally, and then set your bait drifts up. But it doesn't do you any good to ride right over it and then be quiet with your anchor
and then figure it out, right?
Yeah, and then try and figure it out because you've scattered everything. So,
well, Bobby, the big news this week is the new speckled trout regulations going into effect. Butch, what are the regs on the speckled trout? What are we going to?
Yep, and that starts what? Is that tomorrow? Is that right?
August,
tomorrow? Believe it or not,
when people listen to this, it will be starting when they listen. So
slot limit 15
1st.
inches total length, but not over 22. So that's the slot. And then 6 per person per day with 1 over 22 inches, which will be that slot total length allowed.
Bobby, this is very similar to what you've been doing on your boat personally for years now, right?
It is. I've always kept it at 5 trout per person, and I don't allow any fish to be killed over 20 inches. But one of the things too that I want to mention too, because it's going to get a little bit confusing as we adjust to these new size and with this new slot limit on trout is. And Butch, we were talking about you're only allowed 6 trout per person. So you can have 5 in the slot and 1 over. You can't have 6 and 1. You know what I'm saying? So you're only going to be able to keep 6, period. But only one of those 6 can be over 22. But what I've always done, or not always, but for a long, long time, is we keep it at 5 per person, and no trout over 20 inches to be killed. So, it's going to be close for me. I'm still going to stick myself. I'm going to still going to stick to that 20-inch. 20-inch fish is a big fish, and I kept some. We're going to cook some fish tonight, which is I don't cook a lot of trout. We're going to fry some trout tonight, but man, I was so tickled to death. We were catching some really nice sized fish, and then we started catching some 15 and 16 inches, and we've been throwing all those back. And I said, the bigger ones, and I said, oh, great. Those are the ones I want right there. And they're going like, why didn't we keep some of those bigger ones? No, those aren't the ones you want. The ones that eat the best are those ones that are like just over the legal size limit.
Yep.
So those really, if you're going to keep them to eat, those are the ones you want to keep anyway, down towards, it's going to be down towards the 15-inch range. And everybody will tell you that. You get those 20-inch and over fish, the meat gets white and cottony and kind of mushy, but you get those 15, 16, 17 inchers, man, those are the pink, firm fillets that really fry up good. And we're getting ready to fry fish right now, so my mouth's watering. That's why I'm.
Me too.
In my younger days, and I don't get me wrong, I used to love to kill some fish, and I dang sure felt good when I catch a limit, and did my fair share of that early on. And but as I've gotten a little bit older and kind of gotten some of that out of my system, I've realized that, and I really don't like to freeze fish if I don't have to. I really like eating fresh fish, and if we can go to having more fish around, so that's not as much of a struggle to catch fish. And you can get them every time, pretty much. Get them when you want to go get them, and eat fresh fish all the time. Sounds like a win-win for me.
Great.
You're
point.
exactly right on those big fish. They've got that coarse, almost a bigger flake to them, and it doesn't. Not all that appealing. It's not. They're great for a picture, and they look good in an ice chest, but that's about as good as it gets. But nowadays, with the digital photography we've got and stuff on phones and everything else you can shoot it with, you can show everybody you want that big fish, but the ones to eat are those smaller ones. And we've all, we've done it. I mean, there's no way I'm going to stand up, stand here and tell you guys that I haven't, killed a bunch of, those fish, and I did it too. And so, I'm definitely not going to say, get self-righteous enough to say, hey, I didn't do it. But, when you start to see what can happen with that and how prolific those trout are, if you start to release them and what kind of fishery we have and can have, that really gives you more incentive to start releasing those fish, the bigger fish and the ones you're not going to eat. Man, I've had great crews. A lot of the people I go with, before we even put our first fish in the box, I always ask people, are we keeping fish today? So first thing I ask them when we catch our first fish, we're keeping fish today. And because we've done this before too, we've thrown a box of fish, and then guys get to the dock and go, oh man, I'm traveling, I don't need any fish. And you're like,
I got these fish in the box here. So my first question to them when the first fish hits the boat is, are we keeping fish today? And it's surprising. They'll go, a lot of people go, man, not really. Or if I do, I might keep 2 or something like that, So that's another thought, if you got a group out there and, just make sure, like you just said, Joe, they don't freeze that well. So if you're going to cook them fresh, it's great, but they just really don't freeze that well. And if the fishery continues to improve like it's been, we'll have the opportunity to go out there and catch fresh fish and eat them fresh like you're talking about.
Be really curious to see what happens with the speckled trout fishery in the next 3 to 5 years. I think it's going to be pretty awesome.
I think you're right, Butch. Trout are so prolific. I mean, they spawn at such an early age, and they make so many babies when they spawn. I just think this is a great move by our marine resources people to make this move, and I think we're going to see some pretty impressive results. I know what happened when we came with our very first limits, which are the ones that we're just going away from right now. I know what I saw happen, and I just think that this is something that needed to be done. But I think you're exactly right. I think you're going to see results in a fairly short period of time.
It's exciting
I hope I'm
to
right.
think we've got all the elements in our ecosystem to have truly giant. If we're talking speckled trout, to have truly giant speckled trout, we're seeing fish caught in the 10-pound range every year. Don't get me wrong, I love to go out there and just keep the rod bent, but I'm really excited to think that, here in a few years, this area of the northern Gulf Coast can be a destination to come catch.
Be catching those 10-pound trout on the regular. Trout.
Yeah, I mean, to see, regular 30-inch fish, it's very possible, and I gotta think we're gonna get closer to having that fishery.
And on the heels of that too, of what you're talking about, when you talk about a fishery as small as Alabama is, and I think you're exactly right. All of the guys, not all, but a lot of the guides will tell you that we get people from that have been to other states that are blown away by how good our fishery is. Yeah. I think we're probably, it can only improve, but, we got a tiny fishery as far as the entire Gulf Coast goes. Alabama has a very tiny fishery as far as coastline miles, and we have an impressive fishery. And I think with just a little bit of help, dude, it's already impressive to people. I think it can really turn into something really special. If we keep the people that are doing our management, keep moving, keep, doing what they're doing.
Yep. I think so too.
All right, Bobby. Well, as always, we got to get an inshore tip from you. So what are you thinking this week?
Well, we were talking about structure fishing, and this, that's what I've been doing a lot for the last month and a half or so. And, and we talk, again, going with the theme of what we've been talking about with catch and release, is, when you start structure fishing, you're fishing schools of fish that are relating to that structure. They're not moving fish. In other words, they're pretty well staying put. What happens when you release a fish or even lose a fish? When you release a fish, he's going to sooner or later, he's going to make it back to that structure where that school is. And Dr. Sean Powers told me the name of this chemical they release, but the gist of it is, and I'll tell the charters this, I say, guys, when we start releasing this, the bite's going to shut down. When we start releasing fish, the bite's going to shut down. And they go, oh, they go in there and tell their buddies not to eat. Well, they do in their own way. They go in and say, hey, guys, don't eat the shrimp. I had a bad trip on a shrimp, So, yeah. And that's what happens. And you'll see it. It'll shut down cold. I mean, it'll just shut down. It'll go from being on fire to shutting down cold once you start releasing your fish. So what I try and do, if I'm fishing, for example, out of the back of the boat, making a long cast out of the back of the boat, I take the fish when we start releasing the fish. I take the fish to the bow of the boat and get them as far away to the off the bow of the boat as I can, because sooner or later they're going to find their way back. But I try and get them as far away from the boat. I mean, as far away from where I'm fishing as I can, to kind of prolong that, of them getting back into school. So, kind of a different tip. We're talking about trying to keep that bite going, even though you're releasing fish. But if you can kind of get them away from the the school, you'll keep your bite going a little bit longer. And another thing I've done, as crazy as this sounds, is I put fish in my live well, and I put them in my live well and keep them alive until we get ready to leave that piece of structure and then release them, So, but I really just like throwing them, again, kind of as far as I can, not throwing them, but just kind of releasing them away from the structure to keep them.
See Bobby out there on the bow,
shot
lobbing.
put,
yeah,
shot put,
30-inch speckled trout.
I'm not doing a tour with a trout or anything like that. I'm just talking about getting them off the bow, So
well, Bobby,
way.
that is super interesting, and it's very timely because just before we had you on, we had on Michael Carr with Fish Bites, and Michael was telling us all about how his father basically figured out what chemicals fish can pick up in the water to determine where a food item is. So what you're telling me is that, Dr. Powers is telling you the same thing, that there's these chemicals that these fish release, and they're able to determine basically danger from that. It's probably a stress chemical or stress hormone. And
I tried to Google it, but I couldn't find anything.
He described it exactly as that. That's exactly what he described it as.
Because, if you'd have told me this and not put the thing in there about Dr. Powers, I'd be like, how long do you think it took Bobby to come up with that?
Right.
But it's very real. That's super cool. Great tip, and very timely. Also with the with the decreased limits, folks are going to want to keep fishing, and that's a good way to keep the bite alive.
Yep, that's and the only other option you got if you don't have the ability to move around or the weather limits you can wait them out. You know what I'm saying? They'll shut down cold, and then you'll see it start to happen again. But I you guys have both fished with me before. Waiting ain't part of my vocabulary.
Right.
I'm going to go find some fish that are going to bite. You know what I'm saying? So, that's another option for you. If the weather doesn't allow you to do a lot of running around, or you don't have the desire to do that, sooner or later it'll start biting again. You'll see it kind of, valley out. The bite will just die, and then occasionally you'll get bit again, and sometimes it'll start picking on up. You know what I'm saying? So that's another option for you. But I don't have the patience to do that.
Mm-hmm. Bobby, as always, man, that was a great report and a great tip, and we appreciate you being on with us this week. And folks want to look into booking a trip with you. What's the best place for them to go?
The easiest way is just go to ateamfishing.com, and it's got our contact information on there via email or just the old-fashioned way that I still do it, which is pick up the phone and give us a call.
All right, Bobby. Well, thanks again, buddy. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff, Captain Bobby. Keep whacking them. And Joe, it's always good to hear from the marshal of the Mississippi Sound. Dude can catch a speckled trout. Now I can tell you that.
He knows them. He is one with the cyanidae, the drum. Sure. He is one with the drum.
There's been a lot of good stuff happening offshore, man. I heard this weekend was a little bit tricky, but where are we headed next?
Let's head on down to Orange Beach, Alabama, and talk to Angelo DiPaola and hear what's going on the blue water side, the offshore side, and I believe we're going to get a little tarpon report out of the deal. Angelo, welcome back to the Fishing Report, buddy. Tell us, I know you fished hard in this limited tournament the Mobile Big Game Fishing Club put on last weekend. How'd it go?
Man, for us, it didn't go well. We won the award for burning the most gas and traveling the longest distance without catching anything of any substance. We ended up with some blackfins for bait and a barracuda. So, that's fishing. That's how it goes sometime. We thought that it might have been slow for everybody, and it was for a lot of people, but there were some people that made the right calls and went to the right places and caught a few fish.
Well, let's start out by you tell us what you did wrong, and then tell us what you should have done.
All right, so we're fishing. A buddy of mine, he has a 40 Invincible cat with quad 400s, had 800 gallons of fuel. We could cruise 50, 60 miles an hour wherever we wanted to go, and it was calm. And so for us, we kind of looked at we looked at a Hilton's really, and we looked at how that water was shaping up. And due south of Orange Beach, right at Horn Mountain, there was a really nice looking piece of water. All arrows pointed to that's where you should go. Now, what did we do? We looked at that and said there'll be a bunch of people fishing there. and we kind of looked to see how that water was going to bend over to the west. And we went to Mars, Ursa, Neptune area. And we got there just before daybreak. It was a clean green at Mars, but there was bait everywhere. So, those tunas jumping. We're like, all right, we're going to sit here. We're going to catch our bait. And we're going to live bait this rig for a good portion of the morning. That's what we did. And we marked some good fish, but we didn't get any bites. Our plan leaving was we're going to get that far to the southwest and we'll work our way back to the northeast. We knew there was a lot of rigs between us and home base. And we also felt like at some point if there was going to be a rip that we were going to cross it and we could troll it back. Well, like what quite often happens is that rip never really materialized. It was, you guys ever go out there and it's like this blend where it goes blue for a little stretch and then green for a little stretch and then blue for a little stretch.
Oh yeah.
With no current. It's kind of what we ran up against. We knew Patrick Ivy had been out a couple of days before us and they'd caught some fish on Thunderhawk, Thunderhorse, one of those. And so we knew that was between us and Horn Mountain. So we just basically, since we had a lot of speed, we had tuna tubes and we were able to keep some baits alive. We started just working our way back, live baited till we ran out of live bait and then trolled. And we would troll those rigs 3-4 laps. If we saw something, we would fish it. If we didn't, we'd just move on to the next one. We just never saw any signs of life.
Let me back you up a little bit, and this is going to kind of be a bit of a technical question, but you were talking about that clean green water and live baiting. And live baiting is something that that was really got popular after my experience in blue water, and so I don't know a whole lot about it. Now, when you see that clean green, will live baiting work just as well? It just didn't work for you guys this weekend, or is that something that you really want to have super clear blue water for?
We'd seen these little blue streaks kind of, so we knew we're in a blended area and the rig was just sitting in a green part of the blended area. But I don't let clean green water. I don't know how many times I've caught fish in clean green water, whether it be like the nibble, the elbow area, or on a rig. Like really for us, what we're looking for is lots of bait. And like you couldn't send it down a butterfly jig or diamond jig, on Saturday morning without catching a bonita, a blackfin, or a small yellowfin. You'd see some stuff pop in on the water here and there. So we felt like, that there was as good a chance as any as catching a fish there. The one thing we didn't like, and I think that this translates to inshore fishing probably even better, but there was just not a lot of current where we were at. And I think when you have a lack of current, whether it be inshore or offshore, the fish just for whatever reason aren't feeding. And I think it's kind of a little bit what happened to us. I know I had a friend that was fishing to the east of us, and they had current for a little while that morning. They did hook a fish live baiting. So,
well, Angelo, you've got the Ladies' Day tournament coming up this weekend. So since you've told everybody what they don't need to do, now let's talk about what did work last weekend. Where were the fish, man?
So, at least according to the people I talked to, Horn Mountain had fish. I think Asgard had fish. And then a buddy of mine who really did, and just goes to show you, like you can have really great fishermen on a boat, every piece of tackle you could ever imagine, boat with all the capabilities in the world. This guy goes out in a 31 regulator, gets Gage Swan to come over from Dauphin Island, and they go out looking for Asgard, can't find it, didn't realize it had moved, and said, hey, look, there's a rig, let's just go over there. It ends up being deepwater Proteus. They put some ballyhoo out and double up on tuna right off the bat and end up losing a pair of 100-pounders right next to the boat. But like, hey, they are in an area of life. There's fish biting. They end up going 1 for 3 on blue marlin, catching a couple of dolphin and losing another really big tuna. And so, like, from the people I talked with, that Horn Mountain, Delta House area, just that stuff about 100 miles due south of Orange Beach. Really had a lot of fish on it. And heck, I had a buddy that took a 7-year-old and a 23-foot regulator out to the nipple, fun fishing, jumped off a white and caught a 50 and a 60-pound wahoo.
Nice.
That same day, just fun fishing. So, granted, he went back out earlier this week, and he said there's no bait out on the nipple. Water is still the same color, but no bait, nothing happening.
Man, that's got to be tough to lose two fish like that. And
that's first and second place, probably.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's going to happen to me someday, but what's that like, Butch? What's that like losing fish?
I don't know. I've never had that happen to me. Maybe Angelo knows.
I've lost
they don't, Angelo, they don't even hook them. They don't even, you can't lose them. Don't hook them.
We spent the day grilling out hamburgers, lamb chops, and intermittently drinking Budweisers.
I feel so sorry for you. Sorry for you. Well, Angelo, so it looks like we got some good weather for this weekend's Blue Water tournament, and it sounds like there are some fish in country, so that's good to hear. Well, let's talk about tarpon a little bit. I understand you got to do a little bit of that last week. We talked with Chris too, and they're catching plenty of fish right now. What was your experience?
Well, for full disclosure, I'm no expert tarpon fisherman, but I've had some friends. They were chirping in my ear. They're all catching tarpon. They're everywhere out there. And so I was like, Sunday morning, we're like, let's go tarpon fishing. I mean, for somebody that doesn't do it all that often and has only caught a handful ever, we got out there and started running the beach. And I think we just fished from, daybreak to probably 11 o'clock in the morning. I think we saw about 100 fish. We casted lures, we casted baits and everything. And there was guys out there hooking up, and it felt like as if we're in another country. There's so many tarpon out there. I bet we saw 100 fish. I was just thinking, golly, we've got this great fishery in our backyard, and there's hardly anybody out here even accessing it. It's a super easy trip. I mean, for us, we fished from Perdido Pass here in Orange Beach over to Pensacola Pass, swung by Hub Stacy's, ate a lunch, drank a Bloody Mary, had a beer, and came back into the house. It was, outside of not catching any fish, it was a really cool day on the water.
We're gonna have to do a special Angelo segment about where's the bite, and we're not talking about fishing. Sounds like you do a lot of just as much eating out on the boat as you do fishing.
Man, look, like if you're not like enjoying some good food on the boat, and I mean, like I could do a whole segment on must-have boat cocktails and food,
for sure.
Like go-tos. But yeah, it was it's a pretty cool fishery, and I've kind of talked to a few guys, and I know a buddy of mine caught one this morning. I imagine in the next week or two they ought to start showing up in the north end of the bay. It's just basically, from what I can tell, it's like you got to get out there enough, spend some time to be there when they're biting.
Yeah, absolutely. Get with somebody who does it a lot. Somebody like Chris too, that we had on last week. Get with somebody and let them show you the ropes is a big part of it.
Who's a good resource is Chris Bechet over at Sam's Bait and Tackle.
Yeah, I know he does it a lot and does really well there too. Butch, we've got some changes on the cobia regulations that have just been put out by the state. Angelo, I don't know if you saw that or not, but looks like we're up in the size limit on cobia. I think it's personally, I think it's something that definitely needed for those migrating fish. We had a tough year this year, and the last few years have been tough. Did you get a chance to take a look at those regs?
I didn't, but I can tell you, like, we've just got more pressure on all our fisheries in general. So,
yep.
As you have fishing pressure increase, you also need to regulate that fishery according to that additional pressure. So I'm a fan. Yeah,
I am too. I think it's a good move to be proactive. And
cobia went up to 36 inches fork length.
Did they make any changes to the creel?
It just says regulation changes. Cobia 36 inches fork length minimum.
So
doesn't say anything about bag limits.
Well, we'll see. Time will tell. That's for sure. Well, Angelo, guess what, man? You got the Hey Cap question this week, and one of the things I really like about the Hey Cap is getting questions to be able to give all the fishing specialists that we have on here. It's just like we're talking about with that tarpon fishing. If that's something you want to do, there's really nothing like going to an expert to really shorten your learning curve with any kind of fishing, but not just fishing. You need to talk to a specialist, and the guys over at Day Cool Heating and Air are home performance specialists. What does that mean? That means they will inspect your property to find leaking air ducts, hoses. They'll clean out your ductwork, and they'll find the HVAC problems before they become nightmares. So, guys, y'all go check out the heating and cooling specialists who bring you the inshore, offshore, and onshore fishing specialists each week, and mention this ad for a free home performance diagnostic. Contact them at 251-633-5121, online at www.daycoolair.com, or on the Day Cool Heating and Air mobile app. They are Alabama license number 07028. All right, Angelo. Cody Faircloth says, "Hey, Cap, when you're struggling to catch the target species you're after, what do you do to keep yourself mentally locked into and dedicated to that fish?"
Well, first off, we all know it's fishing, so they don't always bite, and what we go after can often change while we're on the water. But I do not ever leave. I think the biggest mistake somebody can do is leave to go fishing without a plan A, B, C, D, whatever, how deep you need to go into that plan. Like, we had we're weak into fishing ourselves, but we had a plan and we executed it perfectly. We just didn't make the right calls. And so I think probably 70% or greater of fishing is just really making the right call on where to go. So if you're going to run offshore, and especially I used to fish out of much smaller boats. So when you're fishing out of a boat with limited range, have that plan of where you're going to go first. And then what are you going to do if that doesn't work out? If you leave from here and you're going to go to the spur and target blue marlin and the water isn't any good out there, well, maybe you got to do, where's the next piece of water? Do you need to run to the double nipple? Do you need to have the range to run back to the west and go to the oil rigs? Well, if you don't, my target species may change throughout the day. Hey, look, this ain't going to happen for us today on the blue marlin front. We're here at the spur. Let's drop down a bait and try to catch a swordfish. All right. That's not really working for us. I know I got to go in at some point. Do I have some deep drop numbers I can hit on the way in? Is there a level area flat bottom that I can fish for tilefish? Okay, then that might be my option.
Yeah.
C.
I like
Man, that don't work out for me. Hey, guess what? We're up on the ledge. Let's try to catch some BBs and some white snapper. All right, good. That's worked out for me. You know what? It's Saturday. Red snapper's still in season. Let's go get a limit of red snapper. One thing I've noticed over the years of fishing is it isn't how you start the trip, it's how you end the trip.
That's right.
So, nobody remembers that first 6 hours of complete boredom if you end it with something good. And look, sometimes that something good may just be some burgers, some great conversation, and some boat drinks.
There he goes with the food and drink again.
How it is.
That's right.
That's Angelo's tactic for everything. Food and drinks. I like it though.
It's not a bad tactic.
It's a great tactic. In my younger days, I would have said, you're not fishing hard enough. These days, boat drinks and burgers sounds great to me.
Well, you know what? And if we're talking, hey, you've got a targeted species and you're going after it hardcore. Look, you need to be able to have an arsenal of stuff in your tool belt, and always fall back on the things I'm best at. But let's say if you're tuna fishing, a lot of times, tuna are on those rigs, you almost need to be fishing 24/7. So you're there doing something when those fish come up and start feeding. Yeah. So, we were talking about this before we got on air, and Butch was talking. Well, heck, Butch, you just take it over. I mean, like if you have a targeted species, go just explain to them talk to them, everybody here, what you're telling us.
Yeah, I mean, you can, like you say, we're out there tuna fishing, and I mean, maybe from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., you're diamond jigging, you're putting chunks in the water, you got a couple down deep, you're netting up flying fish and getting those things, when the captain's holding the boat up. And then at daylight, you might have caught 2 or 3. And that's the reason that the guys that are so successful because they fish around the clock. You're right. We'll fish, until daylight, and at daylight you might be trolling baits, or you might put the kite up. But in a couple hours, you're going to pick a couple that way, and in a couple hours, you're going to be doing the other, trolling or putting the kite up, whichever one you didn't just do. And then you're grinding all day, and then the same thing at night. In the evening, you'll be doing the same deal, just changing out your tools in order to optimize your chances.
So, Angelo, that and tying that in with what you said, it's that option A, B, C, and D, having those things, having them ready to go, so that when you lose confidence in one thing, you can immediately switch it over, and now you got your confidence back. Hey, maybe this is going to work. And keeping baits in the water, you're fishing. So many times Matthew Isbell's talked about it on the surf side. It's like folks want to sit around and watch and look and wait for things to happen. And majority of the time with fishing, that's not it. I mean, Butch, how many times have you been out there and there was literally a 30-minute window that made the trip?
Catch 2 or 3, get 2 or 3 on, and I mean,
just one great fish. I mean, sure. You catch if somebody catches 180-pound tuna, and that's the only tuna you got on the boat, that's still a great trip. Sure. Because it's just a trophy fish. So I like what both of y'all are saying. I mean, keep your confidence by having a lot of options, a lot of tools in the tool belt, and keeping baits in the water.
And be willing to switch up species. I mean, you got to play that hand you're dealt. And I learned this years ago, travel fishing. I mean, you go down to Guatemala and you want to go catch sailfish, and you get down there, and the guy and your captain says, "Hey guys, the sailfish just ain't biting right now, but I tell you what, if you want, the rooster fish bite has been crazy good." Well, I've made that mistake where I was like, I don't care. We've come for this target species. Sometimes you got to be willing to come off of that target species and go after what's actually eating. That makes a big difference in your success.
Well, it does. And why sit there beating a dead horse whenever you could make the trip somewhere else, picking a few other species?
Yeah.
That's a fact.
You went tripletail fishing. They didn't bite, but I know everything's lined up perfect for speckled trout fishing. Well, why would you continue to tripletail fish?
Yeah.
Unless you want to pound your head up against something. I mean, I don't know. I just don't do that. I don't like to fish for stuff that isn't biting.
Yeah.
That can be very frustrating.
Well, Angelo, man, if I wish we could all fish for a living and make our money that way, but so we got to do some other things sometimes. So, how's the real estate market going? You got anything new coming online this week or next couple of weeks?
Man, I tell you, the real estate market, normally July and August is fairly slow months for me when I go back and track it. I don't think we've ever been as busy as we are right now. We just brought on a Harbor Cove, a 3-bedroom in Harbor Cove with granite countertops, deeded boat slip, boat lift on it, $440,000. Wow. $445, my bad. Really where we'll get the appraisal back here shortly. And we'll put that out. If you go on my Facebook page, we'll have all that stuff available. You can reach out to me through that. We're about to list Matt Ship's house. Speaking of food, Matt Ship, the guy that owns, he had Justine's at the Pillars in Mobile. He had Ship's Harbor's Grill at Sportsman's. Now he has Fin and Fork. He has a beautiful house on Wolf Bay here in Orange Beach, swimming pool, bedrooms, chef's kitchen, Viking appliances. I mean, freaking really nice house. We're about to list it. We're waiting for that appraisal to come back to put a number on it. Great views, boat dock, 2 boat lifts, great property. I believe we'll probably come in under $1 million there. Don't hold me to it, but I think that's where we're going to end up being. And go to my Facebook page, The Coastal Connection, get at me through email, Angelo@thecoastalconnection.com. We'll point you in the right direction.
Well, Angelo, as always, thanks for being on here with us, and good luck with the Ladies' Day tournament. We'll talk to you again soon, buddy.
All right, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Angelo. Cody will be getting a brand new Sea Deck ruler for giving us his Hey Cap question on our Facebook page. Make sure you're following us on Facebook at Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report to get your chance at future prizes. And always, you can email us your question at alabama@bestfishingreport.com. All right, man. Let's go back to the beaches and get our feet a little sandy. Let's talk to the Bama Beach Bum. How we doing today, Matthew?
Hey, boys. Glad to be back on the show. Always a joy to hang out with you guys and talk a little fishing for a few minutes.
Yeah, man. I always say it's always a good day when you can sit around and talk fishing with your buddies, don't I, Joe?
That's the truth, man. There's a lot worse things to be doing with your time.
No doubt.
Yes.
Well, what's been going on with your time? What you been catching, bud?
It has been, I think, since I've lived here and been surf fishing, I'm sure there's been other times that have been this productive, but this has been by far my best July that I've ever seen fishing.
That's awesome.
Surf fishing. Yeah.
That's pretty strong.
Really, yeah. It's again, I'm still a newbie. I'm a new kid on the block. I haven't been here but 7 years, so that's not really that much time compared to a lot of these guys. And that's, but yeah, man, it's just really been incredible. The number of pompano that we are catching, I mean, it is just as good as April. I mean, I'm going to just say it. I mean, it's literally these same type of days we were having in April,
wow.
Right now in July with pompano. It's incredible.
That's right.
But not, yeah. But not only that, I was having a conversation because it's interesting to see. I talk with a lot of the guys that fish consistently in Pensacola and on the Panhandle, and they do not see the amount of fish and the variety of fish and the opportunities in the surf like we do in Alabama. So it's really interesting to hear and see what they are seeing versus what we see. And I was having a conversation with them. I'm like, man, it's like a zoo over here. I mean, there's so many species and there's so much life, all the way down to the blue crabs that we have just scattered all along the beaches right now because they come in to lay their eggs. They don't even see that. And there's so many different things that I think are unique to the Alabama Gulf Coast in the way of surf fishing that I think is really, it's been a secret for a long time. I think I've played a big role in unleashing this secret, but it's so neat to see what we have in this really hidden gem of a fishery in the way of surf fishing, and how year round there's always opportunity. Because we're not only pompano, I mean, we're seeing a lot of Spanish. I mean, really, it's been an incredible July for Spanish. I was telling somebody else the other day, I haven't seen it since I've been here. I've not seen the Spanish staying as close to the beach as long as they have this year. I mean, pretty much every day it's a legitimate target that you can go out and catch Spanish from the beach. That's been a more rare thing. We'll see them sometimes, but usually they're a little further off. You just can't quite reach them, but they're well within casting distance pretty much every day for the last couple of weeks, where you can consistently go out and catch them. Not a whole lot of size to them, most of the ones we've been catching, but that's okay. They still, if you still want to keep some, they're big enough to keep and eat, but they're not huge. But it's just been great. I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and there's just always something to do right now.
For those Spanish, you just trying to keep a jig or a gotcha plug rod ready for whenever you see those schools, or how's that playing out?
Yeah, I think I talked about it last time I was on the show. I really personally like diamond jigs.
That's right.
Really,
yeah.
Just because the biggest advantage in my opinion is just being able to really fling that thing, because you can throw it for 1 ounce or 1.5 ounce diamond jig. You can throw it further than really any, a spoon but even a heavier spoon, just because the spoon's so broad, whereas those diamond jigs are more linear, so they just kind of cut through a lot better. A lot of people fish bubble rigs, but those you're just not going to get the distance out of that like you are with the diamond jig. So just having that capability to reach them with the diamond jig is what I really like. You are going to lose more fish mainly because those diamond jigs are so heavy that those fish are really good at shaking it. But I'm okay with that because there's more fish that I can reach that the guy fishing with a bubble rig next to me can't. So I'm going to get more hookups, and that's, even if I lose more, it usually equates to I'm still catching more fish.
Well, I'm not going to let you get out of here without talking about the pompano a little bit more. Skimmed over that. So let's talk about targeting them specifically. Well, first off, talk to me about bait. And then I also want to know, are you seeing any kind of trend with where those fish are running? You know, are they in the trough, on the bar, or is it a mix? What's going on there?
Yeah, a lot of good info here on how and where, when. The baits, I've caught them on fish bites, primarily sand flea flavor. I've caught them on just pieces of shrimp. I'm not catching really anything on sand fleas themselves right now. I've pretty much given up on them. I keep putting it out there and on one of my rigs just to see, but not really seeing a lot of action on sand fleas. So either I would go fish bites, sand flea flavor. Shrimp flavor would probably be okay, but sand flea just seems to always be the ticket. Shrimp or ghost shrimp even. We've had some success with it as well. So that's kind of what I would put your focus in. I wouldn't even honestly bother with the sand fleas because I don't know why, but they're not really hitting it. So I would go with one of those bait options. Something to keep in mind, what we had, and this worked. It worked so perfectly yesterday, and it's not always this way. You know, these fish will make you a liar from time to time, but this has been consistent to keep the ladyfish at bay, because, you know, we do still have a lot of ladyfish, and they can wreck your rigs, and if they're around, you know, obviously I'm not going to complain about catching fish, but that's not what we're going for. You know, we want the pompano. Something that we had to do yesterday that worked like a charm. We were catching ladyfish after ladyfish after ladyfish. Couldn't keep them away. So I took the floats off. So I had some colorful floats that I've been running for the last few days, but I took them off. So it was just a straight hook on the rig. And I kid you not, we didn't catch the next ladyfish, and we caught 3 consecutive pompano. Not lying to you. Wish you were there so that you could have witnessed that. But I mean, I just felt like I felt like I knew what I was doing for about 10 seconds. Like, hey, you know, this worked. But that's what you got to do sometimes, just because those ladyfish are predominantly sight feeders. You know, they've got big old eyes, so that's a clue right there. So if you got that big flashy float bobbing up and down, you know, that they're probably going to win that race between the pompano. So it slowed them down enough that we were able to get to those pompanos. So there's a tip there. Whatever bait you're using, I would take the floats off right now, just because there are other species, but you can get to those pompano. And last, I think you also asked where. That's going to vary depending on what beach you are fishing. However, the beach that I've primarily been fishing here lately, they have been extremely far out. So I would say deeper water. So whatever beach you're fishing, you know, it's going to vary based on your tide and the structure of that beach as far as where that bar is in relation to the beach. It's going to vary where the deepest water is going to be. It may be much closer. You may not have to cast as far out, like if you're fishing Orange Beach or Gulf Shores. But if you're in Fort Morgan area, you're going to want to get that bait pretty far out there. I don't normally get wet when I cast. I've had to do that this past week. I've had to wade out about waist deep to really get to where those pompano were. Otherwise, I was not reaching them. So they're out far. Take floats off. Focus on those baits that I mentioned. I wouldn't bother with sand fleas right now. It's just not productive. And you will find some pompano, I promise. They're still here. We're catching a lot of them.
I think I want to make a motion to make that the Bama Beach Bums either a new tagline or a T-shirt at least. Bama Beach Bum, we want the pompano.
We want the pomps. Bring them on.
That's not what we're going for, but we want the pomps. That's good stuff, man. That's a lot of good intel there.
Well, Matthew, we've got some regulation changes on the horizon, specifically flounder. Looks like we're going to 14 inches of total length. Recreational creel limit of 5 per person per day. Commercial creel limits 40 per person per day, 40 per vessel. And there's a closed season. Biggest change I saw: closed season for flounder, November 1st through November 30th of 2019 for both recreational and commercial anglers. So I want to know, Matthew, you fish a lot more days than vast majority of the anglers on the Gulf Coast. Have you noticed a decrease yourself in the amount of flounder catches over the years?
Ever since I've been here and fishing the surf, flounder fishing in the surf is probably the toughest thing. And I would just credit that to the fact that the numbers have been down is the only thing. I've talked to some of the old timers that have, mentioned the good old days and, when they have caught more flounder, but we have caught them in the surf and we've had some decent days here and there, but it's not something that I necessarily target a lot because it is so slow. It's such a slow fishing. And something that I've talked about with any time that we actually do shift our focus and do start flounder fishing in the surf, you would think that, you find one flounder that there would be others with it. And not once have I ever found a hole or any type of feature where we caught a flounder. There should be some more around here. Never have I caught one and then we caught another one anywhere close to it.
It's not a thing in the surf.
No, yeah, you it's one-offs. So like if you find a hole, you catch a flounder. If you are flounder fishing, I'm not going to say don't try, but it's almost wasting your time. It's like we got to go find another one because another hole, another flounder, and I think that is just because of a decrease in population and numbers. I would assume because normally they're going to school, they're going to be together, they're going to be hanging together. The other thing that I will mention about flounder fishing the surf, it is a high percentage. I don't want to throw out a statistic because it's not going to be anything, but a very high number of the flounder that you're going to see in the surf are going to be under 14 inches. Most of the ones that we have caught in the past are anywhere in that 12 to 13 inch range. Most of them, 90%, there I am throwing out a number. Most of the flounder you're going to catch are the Gulf flounder, not the Southern. Like we are pretty much everyone I've ever caught has been a Gulfie. We've caught maybe a couple of Southerns, and of course the Gulf flounder, they're predominantly a smaller species flounder. So keep that in mind. I would say.
Sorry, did you call it a Gulfie? Did you say Gulfie?
Yeah. Okay. Is that lame?
Go ahead. Sorry.
You cut out for a second, but I assume you've never heard it called that.
I don't think so. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I like
the Gulf flounder, Gulfies. So yeah, we got nicknames for everything around here.
Right. It's the second T-shirt. That's the new shirt.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. We're just making up terms. Boss hog, Gulfie,
Pomps.
Want the pomps. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you are targeting flounder in the surf. It may honestly I think in the future, I'm a big fan of the change. I'm a big fan of it. I'm glad they're changing. They're closed in November. I'm glad they're up in the size. I'm glad they're lowering the bag limit. I think flounder fishing, with these changes, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the future, it may be a more viable target in the surf as it comes back, hopefully. But I would say flounder fishing in the surf, especially with these new regulations, it really honestly may not be worth it, if that makes sense. I don't want to say don't do it, but there's so many, like most of the flounder that we've ever caught, we've kept them because it's just, that's what we're going for. And if it was a legal fish, we would keep it. Most of the ones you're going to see are less than 14 inches. And, a lot of the ones we catch weren't even 12. Like many of the ones we catch, we'd have to throw back. They were 10, 11 inches. But even the ones that we kept would barely be 12 or 13 inches. So It's just not very common to see those big ones in the surf.
Well, it's interesting to see that closure in November. That's a pretty bold move, to just completely close it. But that is when those fish are spawning and they really do stack up in the passes. Not like Perdido Pass, but also coming out of the mouth of Mobile Bay. And that's really kind of across the board in the Gulf of Mexico. You see the same thing over at Destin Pass. And that's when you see those guys spearing, catching limits of flounder every single day. And if we can give those fish a chance to spawn, that's got to help. It's got to help. Got to help.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say flounder is probably one of the biggest, quote, hot topics in the last, 5, 7, 10 years maybe.
Yeah.
Just seems like one of the most talked about, where did all the flounder go?
Right. It's not like they're gone. Yeah. Obviously they're not gone, but when you start hearing from guys who know how to catch flounder
that have been
have doing it for years saying they're not here, guys, they're really not here. You got to listen. You got to listen, and the anglers are the ones that are really kind of pushing that. There's been plenty of opportunity to get involved in the process of these regs being changed, and this has come from the anglers to make that happen. So I'm optimistic about it. I think it's going to help. And and look, I'll let some speckled trout go, but I don't let flounder go. That's like, no. I love to eat flounder. So I'm very sensitive to closures and things like that. But if it's for the betterment of the fishery in the long term, I mean, just look at our red snapper fishery as compared to where it was 10 or 15 years ago, and it's amazing. Now, I'm not saying I want things to get to the level that they got to with red snapper, but there's no one will argue with you and say that red snapper fishing's not as good as it was. It's way better. So I'm hopeful for the flounder fishery. One of the things that is pretty neat over there is the Claude Petit Flounder Hatchery. And if you are looking to support projects like that, a good way to do it is through the Coastal Conservation Association of Alabama and a purchase of one of their distinct CCA Alabama Saltwater Fishing license plates.
There's also fund that cobia project, the cobia tagging project.
Cobia tagging project as well. You can head over to the Alabama Department of Revenue's distinctive license plate page at revenue.alabama.gov to get one of those for yourself. And CCA Alabama is the sponsor of the onshore tip this week. So Matthew, what do you think, buddy? What's the onshore tip?
When I see a lot of people fishing on the beach, talking to them and seeing what they're doing, most people have multiple setups. I mean, and it's more common now. Like, I think people have kind of caught on, it helps kind of have a few rods to kind of locate fish. So, I mean, most of the time people have 3, 4, and I've even seen some running 5 by themselves, which, that's a lot. But,
they're getting their workout in.
Yeah, I know. You're running wind sprints basically on a good day. But they're usually one track minded. A lot of times they're kind of going after one thing. And something that I do on all of my trips is we have a variety in our spread, and just to try to locate what our best opportunity is that day. Because honestly, I mean, I can speculate, but we don't know until we get out there, like really what the fish are, what fish are going to be there, what's hot, what's not. I mean, obviously it could have been one thing yesterday and it could completely be different the next day. You can't go off the day before. I mean, it helps, but you never really know. So what I typically do, if I am running 5 rods, if I've got, at least a couple of people on a trip to help manage that many rods, I usually am going after 3 different things with 5 rods, typically. So usually with one of my rods, I'm going after sharks and bull reds. We'll use some cut bait, cut ladyfish, cut mullet, whatever, and chunk it out as far as we can. 2 of the other 4, I'm going after pompano. So in my mind, these are designated for pompano. We're using baits that are going to be more geared towards pompano, whether that be a bigger bait or fish bites, which is always a fantastic pompano bait. My rigs are geared for them, whether I need floats, what color floats that I'm thinking are going to be good for pompano, or no floats, like we talked about earlier in the show. And then I've got 2 more rods, usually my steelhead rods, which we've talked about that before as well, which are just lighter setups that I bring with me. And those are designated for whiting. We're targeting specifically whiting with those rods. And usually I'm fishing much closer in. Whatever beach we're fishing, doesn't really matter. It's typically always closer to the beach that we're fishing when we're fishing for whiting. With lighter rigs, usually with my pompano rigs, I'm running anywhere from 17 to 30 pound tests. With my whiting rigs, I'm running anywhere from 8 to 15 pound tests. With smaller hooks, single drop rigs, and no floats, typically just always a bead on there, orange, purple, a couple of colors that I personally like. And I don't ever, honestly, as much as I use fish bites, I don't really ever use them for whiting. If I'm targeting whiting, it's always, always, always fresh dead shrimp. Just a little piece of fresh dead shrimp. I peel it, put it on the hook, and that's it. And we're fishing close. And I'm okay with that. Like, if I'm fishing deep for pompano, I want a bait that's going to be more secure and that I know whether or not it's there. I don't ever really put just a piece of shrimp fishing deep just because it's so much work. if it gets nibbled off to keep changing out baits. But when you're fishing for whiting, I'm fishing so close to the beach that it's not that hard to reel in real quick, put another little piece of shrimp, and cast it right back out. So that's why I'm okay with using just that little piece of shrimp and no fish bites. And usually that's the way to get them. It's usually a much quicker bite. I've caught them on fish bites before. It's not that they won't hit them. It's just you're going to get much faster action and much better bites 100% of the time with fresh dead shrimp versus fish bites when you're targeting whiting. So anyway, just mix it up. You don't really ever know what you're going to get into, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're setting up your spread and preparing for your day. Tie your rigs accordingly. Have a target in mind as far as what species of fish you're going for, and you're going to have a better day. Because if you're going all in on one thing, that one thing may not be there that day, and you're going to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs, and it's going to be kind of a blessed day. But if you kind of keep that at this time of year, especially. Let me preface that, in the springtime, you can really go all in on pompano, but this time of year, it may be a really super slow day, and it's going to be slowing down at some point on those pompano. We're going to be targeting other things that are going to be running closer, like your whiting, redfish, sharks, whatever further out. So just keep that in mind this time of year.
Well, Matthew, I always enjoy having you on here. You do such a good job of explaining the process behind what you do in the surf. And, kind of dumbing it down for guys like me who kind of take a little time to absorb all this stuff. But if folks want to get a little more and get some video and kind of take a look at what you do, how can they catch you online?
The best way to get me, if you want to see some video and really get to know me, is my YouTube channel. Just go over to YouTube and type in Bama Beach Bum, and there will be plenty of videos and opportunity for that. Hit that subscribe button if you go over there. That way you'll get notified. Hit the little bell notification so it sends you a notification when I post a video, because I post at least a couple every week. So hopefully it'll help you out.
Well, thanks again for being with us today. We'll look forward to the next time we can have you back on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Wow, Butch. Today's show was jam-packed with a ton of good information. I feel like our contributors really showed out today. What'd you learn?
Really broke out the big guns today. All our guys definitely did. Everybody's segments were packed full of good information. What did I learn? Is that what you said?
I did.
I think what stuck out to me, honestly, from my just lack of experience, rather, for lack of a better word, inshore fishing, Captain Bobby talking about setting up the boat properly to fish where you want to fish. Whether that be, he was talking about structure, but I would assume that would, go to anything where you're fishing a beach or whatever. He was talking about setting up your boat based upon the current and the wind direction. I don't know. Maybe I just, back in the charter days, we had to think about stuff like that and really plan out your day. But usually nowadays, when I go fishing, I just pull up somewhere that I think decent fish are and I throw a line in. I don't pay attention to that kind of thing like I should. And I was just sitting there going, that's a really good point. That's really smart. I'm gonna start being better about that.
Yeah, so. a lot of variables being taken into account, and that's the reason why he can put fish on the deck consistently.
That's right.
When guys like me and you, we're just kind of fishing spots, and he's seeing patterns, we're seeing spots, and if you pay attention to these guys and you really start to pick up on that, I think that was awesome. It really reminded me of fishing with your family, on the island, and with Skipper Theory and Mike Theory and those guys. I know a lot of days they would plan the bottom spots that they were going to fish based on what the holdup was for that day, and right. You don't even, as a customer or even as a deckhand,
have no idea.
On the deck, you don't realize what they're doing, but you just all of a sudden realize, man, all day long we've been bottom fishing in 120 feet of water, and my line's never getting drug under the boat. My lines aren't getting tangled with the guy fishing right next to me. That's not happening by chance. Those really good captains are paying attention to that hold up, and they're thinking, well, if I can keep the boat going, into this direction, then I'm not going to be, having to deal with a side sea, and my customers aren't going to be getting rocked and beat to death as much. They're putting all those pieces together, and
a lot of planning.
Man, there's a ton of stuff that goes into it, and it only comes from experience and time on the water. But man, how cool is it to have those guys share that stuff with us and get us a little closer when we can't be out there 7 days a week like they are.
I learn a ton every week, and I know I say that a lot, but I'm not joking. I mean, every week I come out of this thing, and it helps me catch fish.
Right. Well, when you're working from zero, like for you, like everything is an exponential.
It's all uphill. all uphill for me for sure.
All right, man. Wrap this thing up. Let's let everybody get to fishing.
All right, folks. It's going to wrap it up this week. Another great show, Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report. You guys, if you're not following us on Facebook, make sure you're following us at Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report. We always post stuff, the giveaways, and just us being us. Usually,
have a little fun over there.
That's right. And you guys, if you have not left a review, if you don't listen to our show on iTunes, go over there and leave us a rating. It really helps out a lot to get us a little notoriety on iTunes with Apple. And if you'd like us to email you the podcast each week, just head over to greatdaysoutdoors.com/ASFR and we'll send you the show each week. You guys keep whacking them. We'll see you soon.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by the Alabama Marine Resources Division. They remind all recreational anglers one snapper check vessel report is to be submitted before red snapper are landed in Alabama. For more information about snapper check, please visit outdooralabama.com.
And also, Killer Dock. Are you suffering from dock dysfunction? Check out a full line of dock enhancement at killerdock.com. That's killerdock.com.
Also brought to you by Foster Contracting, Fortified Roofing Pros. Did you know you can save up to 40% on your homeowner's insurance with a fortified roof? Learn more at fortifiedroofingpros.com or call them at 251-973-9999.
This week's Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Angelo DiPaola, the Coastal Connection with EXP Realty, your boating and beach property specialist. Check me out on Facebook at Angelo DiPaola Realtor, the Coastal Connection, or call me direct at 850-287-3440.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report was brought to you by me, Joe Baya, and National Land Realty. If I can help you in any way with the purchase or sale of land in Alabama or Florida, whether it's timberland, farmland, recreational land like hunting land, or even agricultural land or ranch land like Porch Farm, drop me a message at jbaya@nationalland.com. That's JBAYA at nationalland.com.
And also A-Team Fishing Adventures. Check them out online at www.ateamfishing.com or contact them at 251-661-7696.